If there is one thing most of us can be reasonably sure we are safe from while in the comfort of our own homes, it is a speeding freight train. But for one neighborhood in California, a train unleashed a series of events that would forever change the lives of those who called Duffy Street home. Duffy Street lies in a quiet residential area of San Bernardino, California. Early mornings in this neighborhood are punctuated by the sounds of car doors slamming as commuters prepare for the morning traffic, the laughter of kids walking toward the bus stop, and the rumble of trains traversing the nearby Cajon Pass. Duffy Street resident Early Davis heard all this as she stepped out to pick up her paper from the yard on the morning of Friday, May the 12th, 1989. But she heard something else too, a deep rumble that shook the very ground she stood on. Early Davis ran back to her house, covering her head and waiting for the earthquake. The 56-year-old Californian was frightened but not surprised. The newspapers had been predicting the big one for weeks. But as she shouted, "It's here," and turned to peer out her window, she didn't see the ground quake and split. Instead, she saw a train barrel directly into the home across the street. Minutes before, Early Davis witnessed a train flatten Christopher Shaw's home. A crewman on board the Southern Pacific freight train radioed a mayday call. The train, comprised of 6 locomotives and 69 cars, was carrying a sand-like mineral known as trona. In Mojave, the clerks calculated the train's tonnage at 6,151. The Cajon Pass was steep, but there had never been an issue on this route. The small crew of 5 men aboard was nearly at the end of the journey, ready to unload their cargo at the port of Los Angeles after departing from Mojave 7 hours earlier. But as the train crested the apex of the grade and started down the south side of Cajon Pass, it became apparent that there was a problem. At the head of the train, engineer Frank Holland was having trouble controlling the train's speed. He threw the train's air brakes into operation along with dynamic brakes of the lead locomotives in an effort to slow the now frighteningly fast progress of the machine. He asked the helper engine's engineer to do what he could do to help, but there was only one working dynamic brake on the engine. The helper engineer, Lawrence Hill, activated the emergency brake in a panic. The men aboard tried desperately to slow the beast, not knowing that the tonnage estimate for their load was off by nearly 2,000. Instead of slowing the train, applying the emergency brake disabled all the dynamic brakes, allowing it to continue to pick up speed, with the air brakes melting from the friction and heat as the juggernaut reached a terrifying speed of 110 miles per hour on the 4-degree curve just north of the Highland Avenue overpass. The maximum authorized speed on the overpass being 40 miles per hour. The freight train didn't stand a chance, and it departed the tracks before plunging down a 30-foot embankment to Duffy Street. The runaway train slammed into 7 homes before finally coming to a rest. There's a reason the expression "hit by a freight train" is used to describe utter devastation, because no other expression correctly paints the destruction of Duffy Street. Trona ash hung in the air as emergency workers and rescue dogs combed the rubble for the missing. 2 children, Jason Thompson, aged 10, and Tyson White, aged 7, who were in front of their houses at the time of the derailment, were found dead. Christopher Shaw, whose house Early Davis had seen flattened by the train, was, however, found alive. Miraculously, 3 of the 5 train crew also survived, though 35-year-old conductor Everett Crown and 43-year-old Alan Reese, brakeman on the 3rd locomotive, wouldn't be so lucky. With the injured being taken to hospitals and the dead to the morgue, The surviving residents tried their best to pick up the pieces and push visions of the demonic train wreck from their memories. Those left homeless were moved to a hotel downtown. Early Davis watched 2 cranes move the wreckage from her front window, but somehow the nightmare wasn't over yet. 13 days after the train derailment, Duffy Street was finding its way to a new normal. The train wreckage had been removed under the watchful eye of Calnev pipeline officials. They were there because a high-pressure petroleum transit pipeline ran through the area where the disaster took place and ferried petroleum beneath the site en route to Las Vegas. They carefully placed stakes to mark the line, and once the train was removed, they departed, leaving crews to dispose of the rubble on their own. The track where the derailment happened was rebuilt and returned to service. By May 25th, excavators had removed the demolished houses and collected the piles of trona. Around 8 a.m. that morning, the train trundled through the length of track where the derailment had occurred. Minutes later, Duffy Street erupted in a ball of fire that could be seen from City Hall. The Calnev pipeline had burst near the derailment site, showering Duffy Street in a fountain of gasoline. The fuel found a source of ignition in the pilot light of a water heater, and the neighborhood disappeared beneath a towering reddish mushroom cloud. Emergency workers once again flooded Duffy Street, with firefighters managing to control the flames enough to warrant a brief celebratory cry, believing several houses to be safe from the worst of the fire. But just as more fire units arrived and hooked up their hoses, the water pressure dropped to a trickle. There was not sufficient capacity to battle a blaze of that size. Limited by the meager water supply, it took firefighters 7 hours to douse the inferno. Plumes of flame could be seen from far away, reaching the heights of 300 feet. By the time the last flames were extinguished, 11 homes had burned down, over 20 cars had been destroyed, and 2 people had been fatally burned. In less than 2 weeks, Duffy Street had lost 18 homes and several residents. The NTSB concluded that cleanup crews had damaged the pipeline and found leftover debris near the area the line ruptured. They also found that Calnev failed to conduct an excavation of the pipeline through the length of the derailment site, nor a hydrostatic test, either of which would have immediately located the damaged pipe. At the point of the rupture, the pipe was buried a mere 2.5 feet below the surface. Calnev repaired the line following the blaze, encased it in concrete and buried it the required 6 feet deep. But the move did little to make Duffy Street residents feel safe. They pressed the city to block the reopening of the Calnev line, but a Superior Court judge blocked the request. Dejected and frustrated, the neighbors on Duffy Street turned to attorney James Herman Davis, who promised lavish payouts and hosted the victims at a formal party at his Los Angeles home. Davis was just another disaster for Duffy Street, disappearing and filing for bankruptcy after collecting a reported $2 million settlement from Southern Pacific and Calnev. Today, the space on Duffy Street where 18 homes were destroyed sits empty. Southern Pacific and Calnev purchased the homes that were destroyed. Eventually, the land was donated to the city. Many of the residents who survived the dual disaster of May 1989 have since relocated. Those who remain continue to live with a degree of fear. Trains carrying chemicals still barrel past their homes each day. Petroleum, bound for Nevada, still rushes under their feet. Thank you for watching. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.